Hello. Before you read this book, there's some things you should know. So, Howard and I had created this information pamphlet to fill you on the details. Please do not let the comic fall into the wrong hands. The Top Secret Truth About Captain Underpants by George Beard and Howard Hutchins, who deny everything. Once upon a time, there were two cool kids named George Beard and Howard Hutchins. We are cool. Me too. They made their own comics about a superhero named Captain Underpants. Tra la la. Everybody thought their comics were funny. Ha ha ha. Except for their mean old principal, Mr. Krupp. Blah blah blah. One time, Mr. Krupp was being mean to George and Howard. Blah blah blah. So they bought the 3D hypno ring and they hypnotized Mr. Krupp. I will obey. Then they turned him into Captain Underpants. But Mr. Krupp thought he was Captain Underpants, so he jumped out the window to fight Krupp. Tra la la. George and Harry tried to stop him, but every time they had to save the world first. Bad guy. Kaboom! When they got back to the school, George poured water on Captain Underpants' head. It turned him back into Mr. Krupp, but something was wrong. Blah, blah, blah. Because now, for some strange reason, every time Mr. Krupp hears someone snap their fingers, he turns him back into Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la, so whatever you do, please don't snap your fingers around Mr. Krupp. Please, please, please don't snap those fingers. This is a public service announcement from George and Howard, who still deny everything. Chapter 1. George Beard and Howard Hutchins. This is George Beard and Howard Hutchins. George is the kid on the left and with the tie and flat top, and Howard is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. Demanding who that you asked, and you heard demanding on who you asked, you heard probably hear different things about George Beard and Harold Hutchins. The teacher, Miss Ribble, might say that George and Harold were disruptive and behaviourally changed. The gym teacher, Mr. Meaning, might add that they are in serious need of major attitude adjustment. Their principal, Mr. Krupp, would probably add a few choice of words to include, like sneaky and crumbly, mischievous. I'll get those boys if the last thing well, you get the idea. But if you ask their parents, they'll probably tell you that George and Howard were smart, sweet, and very good-hearted. But they're a bit silly at times. I have to agree with their parents. Come and see our hairy armpits. Even though the silliness did get them into a lot of trouble, sometimes in fact they got them into so much trouble that they accidentally destroyed the whole planet with an army of evil vision talking toilets. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2. This story. One fine morning at Jerome Horrocks Elementary School, George and Howard had gotten out of their 4th grade remedial class when they began to see a big sign on the hallway. It was an announcement for the 2nd annual invention convention. George and Howard had fond memories of last year's invention conventions, but this year's invention convention was different. The first prize winner will be principal for the day. Wow, said George. Whoever gets to be principal gets to make up all the rules for the entire day. Everybody in this pool has to follow these rules. We got to win first prize for this year, exclaimed Howard. Just then, George and Howard's principal, Mr. Krupp, showed up. Aha! He shouted. I bet you two are up to no good. Not really, said George. We're just reading about this year's contest. Yeah, said Howard. We're going to win first prize and be principals for the day. Ha ha ha, laughed Mr. Krupp. Do you honestly think after I'll let you two enter this year's contest after that stunt you pulled last year's invention convention. George and Howard smiled and fought them back at first annual invention convention. Chapter 3, The Flashback. It was exactly 1 year earlier, and all the faculty and students of Jerome Horrocks Elementary School had gathered in the gymnasium for what would look better than their own sticky chair incident. George and Howard stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," said George, and Harold and I are inventing something that guarantees to keep you all glued to your seats. "Yes," said George, "we call it glue." Mr. Crop began very angry. "You two boys did not invent glue," he shouted, stood up and the microphone away from his chair, and his chair stood up with him. Everyone in the gymnasium laughed. The school secretary, Miss Amthorpe, stood up to help remove Mr. Crop's chair from his pants. Her chair stood up with her too. Everyone in the gymnasium laughed harder. All the other teachers stood up, and you guessed it, they were stuck to their chairs as well. Everyone in the audience howled with laughter. One kid stood up to go to the bathroom when his chair came up with him. Also, the audience stopped laughing so hard, and they quickly checked their chairs. Suddenly, the laughter stopped, and completely the whole school were glued to their seats. As you see, it was while it was true that George and Howard had not invented glue, but they had invented a new kind of glue. By simply making rubber cement with concentrated orange juice mix, they had created a quick drying body heat reactive glue. They applied their special glue to every seat in the gymnasium except theirs. Early in the morning, everyone in the gymnasium was glaring at George and Howard, seething with anger. "I got an idea," said George. "What?" asked Howard. "Run!" cried George. George and Howard were grinning ear to ear, remembering their silly invention and the chaos that followed. "That was hilarious," said George. "Yeah," chuckled George. "It'll be hard to get that top this year." "Well, you won't have a chance this year, Mr. Crop." Mr. Crop, he took out a magnifying glass and held it to the fine print on the sign. "This contest is open to all students except third and fourth graders, except George Beard and Howard Hutchins." "You mean we won't be able to enter the contest?" asked Howard. "It's worse than that," laughed Mr. Crop. "You boys can't even attend this year's convention. I'm putting you to study in the hall in the whole day." Mr. Crop turned and walked away, laughing viciously. "Rats!" said Howard. "What are we going to do now?" "Well," said George, "you know the old saying, if you can't join 'em, beat 'em." If you want the second part, like and subscribe. Bye.